Welcome to New York's #2 sports show. The Rangers come to an agreement with Ryan Lindgren. They avoid arbitration, and it is a one-year contract with a $4.5 million cap hit. So, not the biggest fan of this deal. I guess in terms of the money, was hoping that it'd be a little bit less than $4.5 million. He was coming off of a 3-year, $3 million per year deal. And so was hoping it'd be more 4 million range than 4.5. The most interesting thing, though, forgetting about that, because as much as that's a little bit of an overpay, the more interesting thing is the term, which ends up being 1 year, which means that Ryan Lindgren, after this coming season, will be an unrestricted free agent. So Lindgren was hoping, I think, for something more in the 4 to 5 year range. Rangers were hoping more 2 to 3. And they end up kind of settling on a 1 year deal. So to me, this is very likely to be the last season, in my opinion, of Ryan Lindgren as a New York Ranger. Again, things can change. Like, this is definitely not a set in stone thing, but that's just kind of what if I'm reading the tea leaves correctly, it just kind of feels like this might be it for him. And a big reason for that is because of the fact that you have Igor Shesterkin, Alexi Lafreniere, and Keandre Miller, who are likely in varying degrees to get pretty big contract extensions and a lot of money. So for Lindgren, I guess the disappointing thing when you look at the Rangers is this is looking like a pretty similar team to the year before. Not that that's the end of the world. Look, this is a team that, was one of the best in the NHL, was very close to reaching the Cup final. So it's not to say that's a terrible thing. But really, all that's been, the defense is basically essentially the same, other than Zach Jones taking on an increased role with Eric Gustafsson having gone to the Detroit Red Wings, right? But other than that, it's pretty much the same, with maybe the slight change of Jacob Trouba hopefully being more on a third pair role. But even that, we don't know for sure. And then for the forwards, it's really Riley Smith being inserted in, Barclay Goodrow out. Like, that kind of in a nutshell is kind of the biggest difference. But of course, it's a little bit different than that. It's really Sam Carrick kind of taking on that Goodrow role, and then Riley Smith really more replacing, let's say, Jack Roslovic. Like, just in terms of what it had been by the end of the season. And some other switches as well. You're kind of hoping that Philip Hedl can kind of take on the role that, not they're different players, but in terms of, third line center, Hedl instead of what Alex Wenberg kind of was. But again, yeah, it's pretty much a very similar looking team, and I don't expect much to change, right? Like, if there's people that think that, like, Kako could get traded or that something can still happen with Jacob Trouba, I don't think that's going to happen. I think that this is going to be it. Now, look, you have some time, right? I mean, you got another month and a half or so until training camp, maybe a little less than that. So it's not this. I mean, things have happened before where there's moves, but it just feels like this is it. But for Lindgren, I was curious to see what would happen. Now, I was hoping that this would be more, let's say, I guess I was kind of hoping to be like a 3-year deal, somewhere in the $3.5 to $4 million range. But look, I get it from Lindgren's perspective. Why would he really want to do that? I'm sure that's what the Rangers were hoping for. You get a little bit of control with him. Like, to me, 1 year deal kind of for both sides is ideal and unideal, because I'm sure Lindgren wanted the security, and the Rangers probably would have ideally, again, wanted him, for more than a year. But also, I don't think the Rangers, they don't want to give him the long-term contract, which I don't blame them, because the way that Ryan Lindgren plays, I don't think he's someone that will necessarily age well. And it's kind of a blessing and a curse. He blocks a lot of shots, takes a lot of hits. And so I think, when he gets, upper 20s, early 30s, not really sure the quality of player that he will be. And to be honest, we did see a bit of a dip this year where I felt like Ryan Lindgren's play, like, you wouldn't really notice it based on the stats. I mean, because look, Ryan Lindgren has always been a defensive defenseman. He's never put up offensive numbers. The plus minus is still really good. It helps having Adam Fox as partner. But I just, based on the eye test, based on some of, I guess, the deeper analytics, Lindgren just wasn't quite as effective this season. And I think that all factors in. So going to be interesting. Look, I think that he'll be, for the most part, with Adam Fox. And that's, the pairing that we're accustomed to. And again, even though I feel as if this is likely to be Lindgren's last year as a Ranger, knowing how, again, it depends. It really depends. But I guess the point is that from an asset management perspective, it's not the best way to go about it if you do want to bring him back. Because let's say he does have a good season, then he's likely to get a raise from that $4.5 million. And I just don't even think that works. And so I think he kind of gets weeded out here a little bit. And it's tough because the Rangers are a team that has, playoff and Stanley Cup aspirations. So it's unlikely that he would be dealt at the deadline unless things went really wrong. And if that's the case, then that's a whole different conversation. But in terms of the unrestricted free agents heading into next year, now Ryan Lindgren is one of them. Of course, the big one is Igor Shesterkin, Jonathan Quick to a much lesser degree as well. And then we're talking about Riley Smith and Jimmy Vesey. So the big thing, here's the one thing I'll say. Does Igor Shesterkin, in terms of any news that might happen from here to the start of the season, the one thing that I should have mentioned is does Igor Shesterkin get extended before the season? That could happen. I think that's the next order of business. And I think that Chris Drury and Igor's camp would want to have that done before the season. You don't really want to go into the season with him, with the uncertainty there, but that is going to be a really, really hefty long-term contract headed towards Shesterkin. So, yeah, again, a little bit of a disappointment in terms of this offseason. And really the one thing of major surprise was, or not surprise, but the one thing that was kind of like, whoa, this is something that you didn't know would definitely be happening, was the Barclay Goodrow, them placing him on waivers and the Sharks, claiming him was a great, just from a contract standpoint, couldn't have worked out any better. But obviously there was a little bit of we were teased as fans thinking that maybe Trouba would be on his way out. That didn't happen. That all said, Trouba has 2 years left in his deal. I'd be very surprised if this isn't his last year with the Rangers. I would honestly be kind of shocked if he is back next season. I think that they find a way to part ways with him, but not until after this season. So in a lot of ways, not that it's a window closing. It's not that, because I do think this Ranger team can be a really good team for a lot of years to come. But for a good portion of this roster, I think that you're going to see legitimate changes after, going into next season. And the plan for Drury, again, not that I totally agree with it, is a lot of deadline deals, which, again, from an asset management standpoint, isn't great to be sort of trading away these second and third round draft picks and things like that. I think that there was different ways to go about it. That said, this should be a good roster. It should be a good team. And I think what we see now is going to be different than what we see at the trade deadline. So there's going to, it's going to require patience. Don't love that this defense basically looks the same. Excited for Zach Jones to get an opportunity, but even with that, it's not much of a needle mover for me. But again, Ryan Lindgren, 1-year deal, $4.5 million cap hit. And so that means that Ryan Lindgren is headed for unrestricted free agency after the season. A very interesting development. And we will see what happens as far as Lindgren's future with the Rangers. But of course, he will be back this season after signing a 1-year contract extension.